When you think about Queen Elizabeth II and the Tudor monarchs, it's very hard to imagine that they have anything in common at all. But in fact, they do at least have one thing in common, other than the fact they're wearing a crown on their head, and that is that the royal family is always on the move. The Queen, as we know, spends the week at Buckingham Palace. She then goes to Windsor Castle at the weekends. Christmas, she's at Sandringham House. In the summer, she's at Balmoral. And so it was with the Tudor monarchs. They were on the move the whole time. In the winter, they are what I would describe as itinerant. In other words, they're moving between a small number of large royal palaces in the River Thames. In the summer, they become peripatetic, which means that they are moving over a much wider field of travel to smaller houses and areas of good hunting, mainly in the home counties. This is a pretty major operation. Every spring, the jests or guests are published, which is a list of the places which the court will be visiting that summer. From that point onwards, there are frantic preparations both at court and in the houses and towns and the countryside through which the court is going to travel. The progress usually began in the early summer, usually began at Greenwich Palace, and it ended in September, normally at Windsor Castle. There were a number of major logistical problems that had to be overcome by the court. The first one was that they didn't actually own enough carts to move themselves. About 350 carts were needed to move the Elizabethan court. So there was a man at court called the cart taker, whose job it was to go and requisition carts from ordinary people around the countryside so that the court could actually move itself. It was pretty hard luck if in the middle of the harvest the cart taker turned up in your village. You could probably let your cart out for 12p a day, but the cart taker had the legal right to hire your cart at the king's price, which was only 3p a day. So carts were necessary and had to be found. Food was also necessary and had to be found, and the royal purveyors would go out to the market towns along the route, and they could buy food at, yes, you guessed it, the king's price, a reduced price from the markets to bring food to the large number of people at court. When you think that there were maybe 200 people just working in the kitchens alone, those 200 people had to be fed, let alone the courtiers and the royal family. The royal horses need to be fed. This was a huge number of beasts, maybe up to 600 or 700 beasts, and they were quite capable of taking all the grazing for miles around wherever the court actually stayed. Then there were the harbingers. The harbingers went ahead of the court to try and find places for everyone to stay. Very, very few royal palaces were large enough for everybody to stay in. And so the harbingers would go out and they would requisition taverns and inns and even people's private homes. People would be then given a billet, a little piece of paper, which had written on it the place where they had to stay. And that billet, or billet, would be handed in at the inn or at the private house so that the costs of the stay could be reimbursed to the innkeeper or to the house owner when the court had actually finally moved on. And finally, we have the gentlemen ushers. Now, the gentlemen ushers are sort of interior decorators, and they go ahead of the king and ahead of the court to the palace or to the house one ahead, and there they set everything up ready for the court to arrive. And that means everything. That means everything from carpets to chairs to cushions to curtains to pictures to tapestries to cutlery, to crockery, the king's own clothes, his sporting equipment. Everything had to be brought and put in these houses. The houses were essentially like empty stage sets that had to be furnished for the king's arrival. So every summer this incredible circus moved through the countryside, a remarkable sight, I'm sure, when people saw it. And in the winter, although it was a lesser operation, there were still 800 people, perhaps, moving between palace and palace in the Thames Valley.